So tonight we return to All Saints' Day. Only this time we finally are in the last prayer that we pray for the office for All Saints. This would be Compline, the night office. So there's a lot to cover tonight. It's a long psalm, and we'd still like to pray. So we'll probably need two parts just to give ourselves a break and then come together for prayer. So we'll see how quickly we move along. As I was praying beforehand, while madly dashing around and still trying to be a little prepared for what we are to cover tonight, I was thinking about an assignment to have at work. We had to put together our biographies for some changes for leadership that we have to do. And of course, there's a section there asking for your interests. You know, what is your life about, you know, outside of work? And I thought, okay, this could be challenging. To help people fall in love with God. I'm not sure if that'll go over very well, but indeed, to me, that's what life is about. You know, all our life is to fall in love with this wonderful God, to appreciate His love, to return His love, to share His love, and to help other people come to realize how marvelously loved we are by this amazingly loving God. I'll probably put that down anyway, see what happens. Who knows what will happen? If you've seen me applying for work, you know what happened. But then I was thinking, sometimes this love with which God loves us can seem a bit hard and a bit difficult. And we sometimes wonder, what's going on here, God? I think it was St. Teresa of Avila, and her great sense of humor, had the famous quip of, as she fell off her horse into the mud, of saying, "Oh God, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder why you have so few." You know? And so sometimes it seems, but in a sense, that's really true. That God calls us to such astounding love. That God calls us to partake of such amazing, incredible love beyond our expectations and beyond our abilities without Him, right? That was our whole foundation series. He calls us to the incredible love as shown on the cross. So the only way to teach us that love is how? Through the cross. In fact, I love the hymn we sometimes sing. We don't have a chance to do it often because it doesn't always fit into the liturgy, but I've referenced it before, Holy Darkness. And it's loosely based upon the writings of St. John of the Cross. And in one of the verses, it just rises in this huge intensity of music. And he just cries out, "Though my love can seem like a raging storm, this is the love that saves. Holy darkness, blessed night, heaven's answer hidden from our sight." You know, and so we sometimes don't know what's going on. But we know that it's God's love. And it's a raging storm, and it seems like it because we have to be brought to that love of the cross. But that's the love that saves. The easy love that isn't very much love at all. The love that's twitterpation. The love that loves because of how I feel when I'm with you. That's not the love that saves, because that love isn't sustainable. It's the love of the cross. Not that we love the pain, but it's the love that is shown by the cross and that we can't learn in our heads by knowledge. You know, there's only so much we can learn in our heads by knowledge. We learn true love in our bodies through experience. And so that's why this love that is so often, not always, but so often intertwined with suffering is the love that saves. Because by our experience, by doing it for the sake of others, not for the sake of suffering, that's sick, you know, but as we are willing to embrace it for the sake of others, we learn it by doing. And so tonight, when we talk about Psalm 91, we're going to see this very important perspective that God doesn't save us from trials, God saves us in trials. And even by saying that God saves us in trials is a bit of a double entendre. That God saves us in our trials in the sense that when we're in the trials, He delivers us. But He also saves us in our trials in the sense that it's by means of these trials and by allowing them to come to us as opportunities to live love that He saves us. So He saves us in our trials, and He saves us in our trials, meaning He saves us by our trials. So let's take a look at this Psalm 91, a very, very famous psalm. We sing it all the time, right? You who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, right? I will raise you up on eagle's wings. That's Psalm 91. So let's take a look at Psalm 91 and what's in there. And we'll start by reading it from top to bottom as we always do. So Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For it is He who delivers you from the snare of the trapper and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and bulwark. You will not be afraid of the terror by night, or of the arrow that flies by day, of the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, or of the destruction that lays waste at noon. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but shall not approach you. You will only look on with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. For you have made the Lord my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your tent. For He will give His angels charge concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the lion and cobra, the young lion and the serpent you will trample down. Because He has loved me, therefore I will deliver Him. I will set Him securely on high, because He has known my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With a long life I will satisfy him, and let him behold my salvation. All right, so there is Psalm 91. So again, as always, before we go verse by verse, anything strike you, anything jump out at you, anything that makes you feel or think as we prepare to pray this later on tonight, as we turn them into our own words to God. Okay, well with that, let's go and hop in verse by verse and see what we discover. So in terms of some background, again, we think of the Psalms as David, right? And sometimes we think of them as later. We've seen some of the Psalms that came from the period of Hezekiah or from the period of the return from exile. This one may be very, very early. Some ascribe this psalm to Moses, all the way back there. Similar to Psalm 90. If we look over at Psalm 90, I have it up here, you'll notice very clearly it says, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. And so there is a thought that Psalm 91 is also a prayer of Moses. There are several resemblances in this psalm to Deuteronomy 32, which we'll bring out later on. And Deuteronomy 32 is that famous song of Moses. So we'll take a look at that. Others think it's a little later. The Targum states that this commentary on the Old Testament states that it's a dialogue between David and Solomon, between father and son. And that would imply an antiphonal psalm, which could, where one side talks to the other, one side sings against the other. And that could explain some of the changes in person, how it goes back and forth between these two persons in the psalm. So let's take a look verse by verse and see what we find. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Almighty. Right there we've got a couple of things to take a look at. Shelter is an interesting word. Most of the translations translate it shelter, but there's a little more implied there. The Jewish Publication Society, the JPS, has covert. Rotherham, the Emphasized Bible, which is a very, very literal translation, translates it secret place. And Brown Driver Briggs, the lexicon that we use, the authoritative lexicon, the dictionary for Hebrew to English, calls it a hiding place, or translated a hiding place with a connotation of secrecy. So kind of being hidden away from this danger. We see the same word used in Psalm 27. In fact, there are a number of similarities between this psalm and Psalm 27 as well. Psalm 27 is another famous one, right? The Lord is my light, my salvation. And in that psalm it says, "For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent and will set me high upon a rock." Things we've already read when we read through Psalm 91, right? So this word shelter is interesting. And the fact that we abide in the shadow of the Almighty, the one who is almighty and therefore has the power to provide this protection and shelter that we're talking about. Let's take a look at Psalm 57:2. And Psalm 57 is a psalm we've gone through already. If you recall, it's one of the very first ones we covered when David fled from Saul in the cave, right? And David cries out, "Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by." Okay, of course, David is praying this while he's in the midst of what? Fleeing from David, being cornered in a cave where he's in danger of losing his life. So he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, "My refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I trust." Amazing how we keep coming back to that theme, right? How important that was, right? The whole divine mercy. What is at the bottom of the divine mercy image? Jesus. I trust in you. Now, we can say that all day long. And we can know it in our heads academically, right? Jesus, I trust in you. But that's not the same as knowing it by experience. And how will we know it by experience unless God gives us the opportunity to be in a situation where we need to trust in Him? Right? Exactly, like David in the cave. You know, David would not have learned that intimate trust. In fact, last night, I wasn't even thinking, it's not on your notes, but last night as I was going to bed, late as normal, and I thought, okay, I don't have time to do some reading. Let me just turn my Bible somewhere and do some reading. And sadly, it was to the section where it's describing Solomon as he falls away. You know, Solomon had this great start. You know, he has his visions of God. God gives him wisdom more than any other man. He has an incredibly righteous, troubled, but righteous man for a father in King David. And yet, you know, it so sadly says that his wives, all these wives he had from all the nations, that he married to make alliances with these nations. Nations where God said, don't intermarry with them because they're going to lead you into their gods. And lo and behold, Solomon, one who has talked with God, one who had David as his father, is setting up idols to Moloch and to Milcom and to Astarte, and who sacrificed their children to their gods and had all these impure rites of sexuality to fertilize the earth. You know, he's setting up all this stuff in Jerusalem. And God tells him, you're not following me like David. I'm going to take the kingdom away from you, but not in your days, in your son's days. And I thought, it's interesting. What's the difference? Solomon had the kingdom more or less handed to him. It was a little dicey at the beginning, but he had the kingdom handed to him. David was fleeing in the cave. Which one learned the meaning of Jesus, I trust in you? Which one held fast to God, even though he stumbled so many times? And which one had everything and fell away. It was the one whose trust was built in the crucible of trials in which God saved him, who proved faithful. So if we say, Jesus, I trust in you, guess what we're praying for? The opportunity to trust him, right? All right, so I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And in a sense, that's why this is a very appropriate psalm for All Saints. It just happens to be also the one for Sunday prayer too, which is always used for solemnities, but it is appropriate for All Saints. So he will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. What's interesting here in the Hebrew, it's not just he will deliver you, but Sonsino, the commentary, the Jewish commentary on the Psalms, tells us that this is an emphatic tense. It's not just he will deliver you, but indeed he will deliver you. It's highly emphatic. For indeed he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. Now here we change voice. So this may be an example of where this psalm is antiphonal. One person is talking about trusting God and one person is saying, yes, I do, going back and forth. Anyone know what a fowler is? So he's going to save us from the snare of the fowler. What's a fowler? What's a fowl? Not a foul ball, but what's a fowl? F-O-W-L. It's a bird. So yeah, so a fowler is a bird catcher. Exactly. A fowler is someone who's catching a bird. And you'll notice in this psalm, there are numbers of analogies to birds. Right? So it's interesting that he says he'll deliver you from the snare of the fowler. We don't, other than chickens and turkeys, we don't necessarily eat a lot of fowl. But often, people ate squab. They caught pigeons. They even caught sparrows. They caught whatever birds they could find. If you're hungry, you catch what you can and you eat it. And so they set out these snares for a fowl, maybe a fowler. In fact, we'll see this also, Psalm 124. There's often this reference to the snare of the fowler. I think I went one verse too many. Oops. Not far enough. Verse 7 and verse 8. We have escaped as a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So this frequent theme of escaping from the snare of the fowler. Deadly pestilence, I have some notes in here. They're just more technical notes of what it is. There are different ways of translating it. Sonsino says it's death of destructions, but Brown Briggs says it is indeed a deadly pestilence. But let's go on from there into verse 4. So he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions. Anyone know what a pinion is? Not rack and pinion steering, but I'm not entirely sure, but I believe if you look at a bird's wings, they're typically folded in half, right? And I think the pinion is the outside part. Is that what the pinion, anyone know that for sure? I think the pinion is the outside part of a bird's wings. So he will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. Again, interesting. You just used the analogy of escaping from the fowler. How? With the adult bird coming around and protecting its children. He'll cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. So often we see this theme of God as the mother hen protecting its children, or as an eagle protecting its children. If you recall, even Jesus uses this analogy. Do you recall where it is? Pinion is the outer part of it is out of the outer part. Okay, I got it right. Look at that. Actually, remembered something from biology. But here is Jesus, very close to the time of his crucifixion. Right? And he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not." So the help is there. We see this theme often. Psalm 57:2 we've already been to. Psalm 17. Oops, did I go the wrong place again? Nope, just off by one. "Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings." Again, Deuteronomy 32. As we said, there are a number of analogies or a number of similarities between this psalm and Deuteronomy 32. Moses speaking of God. "Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions." This is particularly interesting in light of what we're talking about tonight. That the understanding, the legend of the time was that the way young eagles learned to fly was that the parent eagles would come and flutter them and chase them out of the nest. And as they would start hurtling towards the earth, they would need to fly because they were in the midst of falling to the earth. And if they couldn't, if they were ready to fail, rather than letting them hit and die, the eagle would swoop underneath them and gather them on its wings to rescue them, bring them back to the nest, and try again. All right, so what does God do to teach us to soar like He does with His kind of love? Shoos us out of the nest, and out of our comfort, into trials. Why? Not to hurt us, so that we can learn to fly like He does. And if we can't, if we're in trouble, what's He going to do? Swoop down underneath us and rescue us in our trials, not from our trials. Otherwise, we would never learn how to fly. All right, so interesting analogy here in Deuteronomy 32. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, and then catching them when they're in danger, bearing them on its pinions. Let's see. We have a couple of other ones in here, but I think for time's sake I'm going to skip them. They're in your notes if you'd like to cross-reference them later on. Now, it's also interesting here. Let's go back to this scripture in Psalm 91. All right, so, "He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler." Anyone know what a buckler is? Not what goes on your belt, but anyone know what a buckler is? Okay, if you picture some of your movies from medieval times or Greek or Roman wars, they're doing hand-to-hand combat. Okay, and a big shield was kind of unwieldy. If you were attacking, you were worried about arrows coming down, you might use a big shield. But if you were in hand-to-hand combat, that was too unwieldy. So what did you have? You had that small, typically round shield, right? And you'd attack and you'd protect and attack and protect. So that buckler is that small shield. Okay, and of course you'd use a large shield to protect you from large things that might be hurtling your way, coming down off the castle or wherever it is. So now, His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. When do you use a shield and a buckler? When you're fighting. Exactly. You don't use it when you're at the beach. You don't use it when you're sitting around a nice meal at home. At least I hope not. You don't use it. Maybe turn it upside down, put the salad in it, You don't use it when you're relaxing on vacation. You use it when you're in the middle of a battle. So, what do you think we're in if God is going to be His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler? We're in the fight. But He's protecting us. And we'll see this theme continue. Okay, "You will not fear the terror of the night." Interesting analogy. We'll look at this in another translation because the RSV kind of obscures this. But there was, of course, the danger of attack at night. It's an interesting, kind of out of place reference to this in the Song of Songs, of all things. This love song of Solomon and this woman, or the wife, or the woman that got away, or the woman and the real person she loves, as opposed to Solomon who wants to court her. There's all kinds of things about what the Song of Songs is all about. But if we go to the Song of Songs, and, oops, where was it? Was it 3 in verse 8, or was it 8 in verse 3? Did I get it backwards? There it is, okay. And it's talking about this litter of Solomon. Litter, not the things he's throwing on the ground, but the thing that the guys carry on their shoulder to transport royalty around. Okay, and so Solomon, this magnificent royal king, is being transported. And around this litter are all these men, these, I think, 60 warriors, it says. Let's see here. Go up a little bit. Yeah, the couch of Solomon. 60 mighty men around it, are the mighty men of Israel. All of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. Okay, so they're armed for battle. And you will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noon. Interesting, there are differences here. You notice in verse 5, we have the things that other people do to us. Man-made dangers that could put us in fear. Right? The arrow that flies by day, the terror of night. And in verse 6, we have natural things that can cause us to fear and cause trial. Right? The pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noon. So we have both man-made difficulties and we have natural-made difficulties. Now, the thing to notice here is that God has not saved us. He's not saved us, He's not taken away the arrow that flies by night. He's not taken away that flies by day. He's not taken away the terror of the night. He has not taken away the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, and He has not taken away the destruction that wastes at noonday. What He has taken away is what? The fear. Right? You will not fear the terror of the night. That means there is terror of the night. Okay, you will not fear the arrow that flies by day. That means there are arrows flying around the day. Right? We go to work each day, right? Sometimes, right? Nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness. It's there, but you're safe. You don't fear it. The destruction that lays waste at noon. He takes away the fear, not the fact that there are arrows and pestilence and terror. So it's an interesting difference in the perspective. Notice also the round-the-clock protection. This is better than any insurance policy you can buy. Right? You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noon. In another psalm that we'll cover, I don't think we've covered this one yet. Actually, we have covered this yet, right? We did Psalm 121. We did it recently, in fact. In Psalm 121, right? In verse 3, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. It's round-the-clock coverage. But notice how the closeness of the danger persists. Right? So we go on. You picture these arrows flying all over the place, the pestilence. You can picture this terror that we don't fear. Why? Because we trust. Look at verse 7. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand. This is really close. You're in the midst of trouble. You're in the midst of affliction. You're in the midst of danger. 1,000 falling here, 10,000 falling right there. But you, it will not come near you. God doesn't save us from our trials. He saves us in our trials. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. This is another case where this may be an allusion to Moses. In fact, verses 6 through 8 may be a reference to the plague in Egypt and deliverance from Egypt, right? The pestilence struck at night, the terror at night, the arrows of Pharaoh's army charging down upon them. And this is an interesting reference that you will look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Let's go back real quickly and just look at a couple of scriptures from the Exodus. Exodus 12 and verse 23. Remember, we said this might be a Mosaic psalm. Okay, so for the Lord will pass through to slay the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to slay you. Okay, so that happens, and then they're leaving Egypt, and God leads them. This is kind of interesting. Again, I hadn't thought of covering this, but if you remember, God does something intentional. He intentionally does not lead them by the way of the Philistines, it says. They could have gone, Egypt and the land of Canaan are connected. They could have gone through the area that now is the Suez Canal, all the way on land. But instead, what did God do? He led them down south, and he stuck them in a dead-end canyon. All right, you had mountains on this side, mountains on that sea, the Dead Sea on this side, the Red Sea on this side, and you've got Pharaoh's army coming down towards them. They're trapped. And they are going to be wiped out unless they trust in God. God intentionally bringing his people into a place of peril, not for their destruction, but for their salvation, to learn by living and by doing and by experiencing trust in him and in his love for us, just like David learned it and Solomon didn't. So Moses said to the people as the Egyptians are charging down, "Fear not, right? You shall not fear the terror of the night or the arrow that flies by day. Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again." And then further down, I believe it's in verse 30. Right? The Egyptians don't learn their lesson. They don't know that God keeps telling them, "Set my people free." And they come charging after. They just don't want to listen to what God has said. So the Red Sea collapses back over them, and they're drowned. And thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which the Lord did against the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So again, perhaps we can see this reference back to the Exodus in, "You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked." Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation, no evil shall befall you, no scourge come near your tent. Now, it's interesting. Some translations hide the use of multiple perspectives in verse 9, and the RSV does that. It actually appears to read, "You," remember this might be an antiphonal psalm, "You have made Yahweh my refuge." You haven't made him my refuge, but you've made Yahweh, who is my refuge, your refuge too. You've made Yahweh my refuge, the Most High, your dwelling place. And we see this in some of the other translations. I think we still have the New American Standard Bible up. We can take a look over there. Right? "For you have made the Lord my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place." So just an interesting thing that, again, sometimes the translations will leave out. Oops, let's get back to the RSV. "Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation, no evil shall befall you, no scourge come near your tent." Evil here is not the sense that we mean it in a Western sense, this conceptual idea of evil. Evil here means adversity or difficulty. We can tell that by seeing how the word is used elsewhere, looking at parallelism. Remember when we began the study on the Psalms, we spoke about parallelism as a key component of Hebrew poetry, saying the same thing twice with just a different set of words. And so, if we look over in Psalm 90, again, the Mosaic Psalm that's right before this, we'll see this used. So Psalm 90 and verse 15, or 16, depending on which translation you're using. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. So we see affliction and evil being equated. Not evil as in malintent, but evil as in difficult and painful things happening to us. At this point, let me go ahead and take a break. As I said, we do have to break this up. It's a little early, but I think the heat also ran out. So we'll get the heat back on. We'll refresh ourselves a little bit. We'll change the battery on that camera, and then come back for the second half of the psalm and then pray complain.